We've been talking a lot about David Hawkins lately, his reverse CSI theories, his reverse engineering of crime scenes and crime scene investigations, because I've been just kind of perplexed by a lot of the weird stuff with the Donald Trump assassination attempt. And I know that David would have loved that. People who are longtime crowdsource the truth viewers, everybody misses David. I guess we're coming up on 2 years. Wasn't it September 2022 that he died? But he would have been all over this. He was very concerned with the timing of events, and that's come up. John Cullen had that mega sync cut that he released, and that's about timing, linking the timing of the different videos so that we can understand more the evidence, the narrative. We've spoken about how, John is doing this crack thump. A lot of people are. That's the component of David Hawkins' reverse engineering, where you attempt to identify the unique technological signature of the weapons used in the crime, and then that helps you understand the characters, the narrative, how it was done. And the component that we haven't really been using is the patents. David, he would always somehow find these patents that were, linked to whatever it is that was going on, whether it's John Benet Ramsey or 9/11, all these different unsolved things that David would look into and would be fascinated by. I know that this Butler, PA, the Donald Trump assassination attempt, that would have been right up his alley. So I hope we have a lot of, here's a Rivian charging. I hope we have a lot of David Hawkins fans with us today, and new viewers. If you're not familiar with David Hawkins, maybe you'll become a fan. We're going to talk about what he would have done to kind of figure this out. And I said it yesterday, and I was talking to Cullen about this last night. We're sort of at this point where maybe 90% of the evidence that we're going to see, the leads to evidence, the videos, the photos, the testimony, a lot of that is out, right? First 2-3 weeks, that rushes out. And then now we're sort of looking at it, and then maybe we have strong conclusions about some of it, weaker conclusions about other elements of it. I've been this photo, this Doug Mills photo, no, that's bothered me from the second I saw it, because everybody has this moment, right? When Cullen first heard about the Las Vegas shooting, he wasn't doing YouTube videos about unsolved government conspiracies or true crime or anything like that. He said he was very much a mainstream news kind of guy and thought the news was telling the truth. But when he heard what they were saying about Vegas, he just said, wait a minute, I have all this personal experience with guns, and what they're telling me on the news just happened. It can't happen. Same thing with me and this photograph from Doug Mills. I get it. We can speak ad nauseum about how freezing the motion of a bullet by photographing it in 1/8,000th of a second could produce an image like that. And also, to be clear, I've taken to making some kind of parody images of some of this stuff. Well, let me speak carefully here. This is a parody of the Doug Mills photo, in that I've been, putting a flame trail on it just because it's ridiculous. And the first thing I could think of is well, how would you do that? Photoshop, get a picture of a bullet. And that's what I did there. I have just a bullet that I got from Google, streaked it with motion blur in Photoshop, put the fire on there. So I'm saying, I did that in 10 minutes. Somebody really wants to get into making a bullet look real. You want to talk about, go to LA, go to lunch somewhere near where Santa Monica, where they have visual effects places. We're going to talk about people who understand light and the subsurface scattering of light on different, the paint on this car versus your skin. People study this stuff. So, making it look realistic Somebody's an expert in that, but I don't know. A lot of people don't seem to think that that's happening. And also, I haven't been able to get any information from Doug Mills. I'd still like to speak to Doug Mills and just ask him some very pointed questions like, look, the reason I'm saying this couldn't happen, and because Cullen keeps saying, well, I'm gonna get this kind of camera and we'll go in the desert and shoot this kind of bullet. It's like, dude, you're not gonna get a picture of it. This is like, you know, setting up to do a test where you're gonna jump off the Empire State Building and land in a glass of water. It's no. I'm not interested in testing something that I just know isn't going to happen. And you see, the other thing is I've been looking at just regular professional photography YouTube channels, which, you know, they have to tell you, I'm not political and I don't want to get into conspiracy theories, but let's look at this photograph that, just listen to how these professional photographers talk about it. They basically, they know it can't possibly have happened. I think that their reluctance to go to the place that I'm about to go to causes them to presume that maybe the guy just hit the shutter button and got the picture. And just to be clear, let's make sure everybody understands what's going on. Because this was, if it is a social engineering campaign by Doug Mills and the New York Times and whoever else is promoting this, obviously not what they're telling us photo, I think it's a social engineering campaign. So how did it happen if it's not done with Photoshop? Because some people say no. And to be true, I mean, to be honest, it's not like I see anything in the image that tells me it's been manipulated with Photoshop. There's a lot of people maybe who don't know that much about photography and Photoshop and digital files and cameras and things that would just say, oh, this is Photoshop. And it's like, well, what do you mean? And they think that because Photoshop exists and somebody could use Photoshop, and this is just an idea that came into their head, that's some sort of argument. I mean, it is fair enough spitballing. And you know, if you're sitting around trying to figure something out with a bunch of people, tossing out ideas is okay. But what I'm trying to do, and I'm trying to encourage people to get involved with, is to refine our process, not to cast a wider net. A lot of people have been asking me about this guy, Art Thumb. I don't know what happened to Art. That guy's driving like crazy. I don't know what happened to Art, and that could be worth looking into, but for now, we got enough stuff on our plate, and I'd rather go for the sort of most obvious. Like David Mills, he's a guy, somebody could find out where he is and ask him. So here's some of the confusion. People are saying, the speed of 1/8,000th is not just being used to capture fast-moving subjects. I'm not sure what that commenter means, but the point is, the shutter speed is just one thing, because 1 second passes 8,000 instances of 1/1000th of a second are contained in 1 second. When you push the trigger on the Sony ILCE1, it goes click, and so it snaps a picture. Even if it snaps 30 pictures, it's not, 30 out of 8,000. Maybe it is, I don't know. Someone do the math. What is 30 out of 8,000? I think if you fired that thing 8,000 times and clicked your finger, you would not get 30 successful pictures. Certainly not with the composition that he had. Remember, it wasn't the bullet coming towards Trump's face where you're left, if all you saw was that photograph, you'd say, oh my God, is that the moment before the bullet hits? No. The nearly perfect, arguably perfect, inhumanly, improbably perfect composition of that photo, setting aside the timing, where the bullet, it's just behind. That picture says 1,000 words, 1,000 news broadcasts. It tells you that the bullet missed. Now, let's set aside the theory that Photoshop was used, because I've been speaking to a lot of my friends who are professional photographers and they scoff at that. You couldn't do that. The way these cameras work, they have Wi-Fi, the images get sent directly to the AP from the camera. When would that have happened? He's going to present them with a raw file, that's sensor output. You can't edit something in Photoshop. And somebody could do that, but these professional photographers are right. That's a lot of stuff that I don't have evidence that it occurred. And probably Doug Mills' photos get seen by a lot of people from the types of stuff that we're talking about. It gets sent automatically to whoever, AP, New York Times, whatever. So I started to think about that, and well, it just doesn't seem possible to me that he could take this photograph and that it would be so perfect, because that's just it. It's not about just catching the bullet in the frame. It's about, you'd have to do it 8,000 times for however many seconds until you got that perfect composition. Or maybe that was just luck too. This guy's like the luckiest guy in the world with a camera in his hand. And I'll tell you something about some of these professional photographers. They're not as smart as they think they are. A lot of them think they're like splitting the atom or, you know, doing brain surgery. They're a bunch of dicks pointing a machine at something and pushing a button. And you know, there's even, now they're asking if these guys are even looking through the viewfinder when they shoot the picture. Now, don't get me wrong, I do this as well. There's timing, there's instincts, there's being in the right place at the right time. Doug Mills holding up a camera, not looking through the viewfinder, might get a much better result than you because he's practiced at it, and etc. But the point is, I'm not so impressed with some of these guys, and I'm definitely not impressed with Doug Mills. But I was thinking, like, if not Photoshop, what the hell could they have done? And I was racking my brain. I was trying to think, like, what would Hawkins do? What would David Hawkins do? And I've been frustrated because I couldn't quite tell. And then he kind of came to me almost like in a dream.
You will never fully understand the unlikely events of July the 13th until you search the Patent Office. In 2022, Sony applied for a patent which applies artificial intelligence to the inputs from an array of sensors that can detect the motion of an object and carry out imaging at a timing desired by a user. Now think about it. That means that Douglas Mills could have received a low-key warning that a high-speed event was to occur once your former President Donald Trump began to speak. He would have set his shutter speed to 1/8,000th of a second, the shortest interval available to him, and he would have compensated for the short exposure time with a large lens aperture opening and a correspondingly low f number. Here, the lowest available was f1.6.
David spoke to me. And I went and looked in the patent office. And sure enough, that was a real patent he was just speaking about. That's obviously not the real David. That's an AI avatar that I created. I hope people aren't creeped out by that. I realize it's a little bit deep in the uncanny valley, but I don't know. I've wanted to do that since David died. And it really did help me to get into his head and his way of thinking. Like, that hit me like a bolt of lightning, the patent. See, this photograph, it's a weapon. It's a weapon that was used in this. It's an information weapon. And it's created, I think, in such a way that we are led to believe that it's an authentic photograph taken by a skilled professional photographer who you can't question. You're just some idiot reading the New York Times. This guy's won Pulitzer Prizes, and he knows everything you can know about a camera. And well, it was interesting, of course, and then I started thinking more about some of David's theories.
The Mills photograph would have been required to establish the precise timing of the kill shot and necessary to settle wagers in gambling establishments such as White's Hall in London, where Fabian socialist establishment elites interested in centralized credit and an intellectual elite ruined class would have used the proceeds from such death pool betting to finance the murder of Donald Trump.
It's quite interesting to see David again, isn't it? Yeah, for people who never saw the shows that I did with him, this is what he used to talk about. Uh-oh. What's happening with the sound? Death pool betting. I mean, frequently it would sound a little crazy when he would say it, but, you know, that was one of the things that I loved about David, is that he had this incredibly unusual way of thinking and approach to everything, and it just led to discoveries that were nothing short of amazing. And the way this all came about was also really good. I'm not going to say it was like divine or anything like that, but it is the collaboration of the universe, because what happened was we were talking about David, John and I, during some of our broadcasts that we've been doing about the assassination attempt and, you know, his reverse CSI method. And so I've just been thinking about it a lot, and people have been hearing about him, and, you know, you can still see a lot of the legacy videos on Odyssey for free. People can go to odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth, and just even if you subscribe for free, there's a lot, you know, search for Hawkins in the content tab, and you'll see some of these videos. So somebody was watching one of the Hawkins videos on there about the White House military office. And I was reminded of that thing, and so that got me, they sent me a question about how to access it, and I told them, you know, go to Odyssey. But it just started me thinking about this White House military office, which that was something we discovered together, or I discovered it, we were talking about it on his show, and he was fascinated by it. And it is fascinating, and we haven't even looked at that in terms of what role it would have played in this assassination attempt. So that's opened a new vector. But also just, you know, listening to David and talking about the death pool betting, he was fascinated with timing. And here we are, 1/8,000th of a second. That detail alone would have fascinated him, because he used to talk about how, you know, the invention of first this maritime clock allowed the British Navy to synchronize operations, and it was complicated. The clock was on a gimbal. You didn't have electronics then, so making something that would function on a ship, this was a technological breakthrough. So David used to, it was interesting. It was so interesting listening to David. He would talk about how this intellectual elite, this group of intellectual elites, wanted to have, you know, mass credit, what is centralized credit, and government, you know, world government controlled by the elites. It's everything that we're sort of getting now. So it's important to go back and look at and think about the stuff that he used to say. And I hope that this artificial intelligence visualization tool that I've created helps us to better understand some of the things that David might have said.
The horrific thing to contemplate is, what did Douglas Mills actually expect to capture in that 8,000th of a second?
That's another thing that I started thinking about. So just so everybody is clear, I know perhaps the visual effects and artificial intelligence avatar of David during a live stream is maybe a bit distracting. Sorry about that. I've always been fascinated by the technology used to make motion pictures, but what does this all suggest? The other thing that David used to talk about was the mens rea, the guilty mind, right? Because if you told me that this was like a high school kid running some 1080p camera at 60 frames per second, didn't know what he was doing, and had the electronic shutter set to 1/8,000th and one frame in this person's video where the guy set it up and walked away, and one frame in the video captured that, that would be less suspicious to me. And for whoever is saying, like, that's not likely to happen, well, that's what they're telling you that Doug Mills did, because this camera that he's got, it shoots 30 frames of still photos per second continuously. It doesn't shoot 8,000 frames per second. If you had an 8,000 frame per second camera, you would capture the bullet. And that is the type of thing that you need to capture that. Because remember, if you have 60 time intervals in a second, and this thing is moving at 8,000, traversing your frame substantially in 1/8,000th of a second. You're not gonna get a photograph of it. It's just the way it works. So again, this is not definitive, but it just gives us more questions for Doug Mills. If there's ever a real opportunity to talk to that guy, notice everybody. Where are the parents for these little kids? Where are the parents? Selling igloo cooler stuff? Okay, so 5 years, 10 years, when those guys are what, 19, 18, they're just rolling around doing whatever the hell they want now. Are they going to be educated, productive members of society or no? But anyway, the mens rea. What AI Hawk said in that little moment, Sony has a patent. It's the world's only artificial intelligence imaging sensor. And it has the ability to, through an array of other sensors, detect motion. And you even saw in the diagram in the patent, it's like you can set the goal of when this thing moves past the line, it's going to automatically take a picture. In fact, what that patent describes, to me, seems absolutely necessary to take the photo that Doug Mills took, and I'm going to modify my hypothesis. I don't think he used Photoshop. I can't explain why he cropped it to a resolution other than the original. Yes, I can. So, okay. David said it's possible that Doug Mills got a low-key warning. I tried to use as many Davidisms as possible to make that authentic. I can explain the technology used to create AI Hawk if people want. But someone probably wouldn't have told Mills, exactly what was expected to happen. I wouldn't think, I don't know. But someone would have told him there's going to be a high-speed event that needs to be photographed at 1/8,000th of a second, or the highest shutter speed available. And this guy might have said, okay, whoever in the CIA is telling me this has given me lots, or whatever agency has given me lots of good insights in the past that have led to my award-winning photos. So I'll listen to this person. By the way, if an unexpected high-speed event was to happen around the president and that was all you knew about it, that would explain a 24mm lens, wouldn't it? You'd want to be really wide to capture everything. And you'd set the camera to the highest resolution setting knowing that you were using an unusually wide lens, because then you could crop it in exactly the way that he has and still have a sufficiently high resolution image. See, most people, they do things that make sense. And if you see something happening that doesn't make sense, there's probably another explanation for it. By the way, that's another characteristic of artificial intelligence. Every human photographer that I've spoken to about this, most of them are professionals, some of which have been shooting for 50 years, I think are much better photographers than Doug Mills, but each and every one of them, they just can't explain this photograph, and they agree that the settings that were chosen make no sense. So artificial intelligence does that. When you see settings that don't make sense, like when they were building AlphaGo, the artificial intelligence that defeated the world champion at that Chinese strategy game Go, it was a whole movie, and they've got all these Go experts monitoring the progress of the thing, and then when it gets to the point that it's beating, I think the guys from Singapore, it's beating this champion, they're in this like master control room and they're looking at it, and they're like, there's computer experts, there's Go experts, and the Go experts like don't understand the moves that the computer is making. They don't understand the strategy. It doesn't make sense in the context of what they understand. So when we have all these anomalous settings on the professional photographer's camera, it's at least a hint that some thought process that humans don't understand was involved in selecting those settings. Now again, we don't know exactly how this Sony technology works. Somebody's going to dig into that patent and say, no, this is on the Exmor sensor, and Doug Mills was using the this and the that and the other thing. What Hawkins would have said to that is, well, the patent exists. And so this technology could be applied to another sensor. You know, he would say something like that. And you could say, I have a Sony ILCE1, and it doesn't do that, so you're wrong. But the fact is, we already know, oh yeah, one of these professional photography YouTube channels I was watching said that like AP is sponsored by Sony or something, so they all, AP photographers, use Sony. And then this guy, David Mills, has some kind of special deal going on with Sony where, you know, they probably give him this camera because they just want to say, oh yeah, David Mills shoots with our, that's the picture taken with our wonderful Sony, whatever. And so like, look, when I am working with companies, I'm not as famous as him, but there's 3D companies and software companies and things that have been like interested over the years and stuff that I've been doing and give you some advanced product or some beta software or something. I absolutely have high confidence that Doug Mills has access to beta firmware releases for that Sony camera where even if the stock camera can't do what I'm describing, this to me has become the most plausible theory of how that photograph could possibly be taken because, oh, you know what? I forgot one of my Hawkins videos because I've been developing this AI thing, and the way I did it at first was not as good as what I ultimately have, but there was a line that he said that I forgot to put in the most current videos. Point of the matter is, you know, I could go meet Cullen wherever it is that he's describing that we want to go some desert somewhere and shoot, because I told him we need like something. You want to basically shoot this way, and you don't want all this, you know, different colors and noise. You want like a sand wall right here, something all the same color, and then shoot so that the bullet is going straight across a solid color background. So the idea was we're going to go somewhere in the desert where there's like a hill, and to go to all these preparations, it's like that's going to cost a few $1,000s to go there and with the guns and cameras or whatever. But the cameras that Mr. Cullen is contemplating doing this with, I mean, it's like, why don't we spend a day testing if we can nail Jello to a wall? It's certain things you don't need to test. And I'm just saying, I think you could just as easily catch a bullet in your teeth. And I'm not exaggerating. You know, you could probably find some kung fu master who got Kanye West's dentist to, you know, put in some kind of titanium grill and you catch the bullet. I think that you might have as easy a time doing that if you had a bulletproof head. It's just, you're not going to be able to do it. It just cannot be done. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's so close to that I just can't overstate it. And with this, we saw the diagram that Hawkins showed, AI Hawk showed. You could say, hey, when motion is detected, fire the shutter 1/16,000th of a second later. So that means however much that thing is traveling in 1/8,000th of a second, you detect it, it's halfway through its travel, bam! The shutter fires. That looks approximately to me like what that picture was, doesn't it? Halfway through, I mean, how could you get, we don't know the full width of the frame. Right, so this is why the metadata, the original metadata couldn't be shown, because he doesn't want you to see the ISO because that might be crazy. I mean, again, remember, this is ostensibly, possibly, settings made by an artificial intelligence in 1/16,000th of a second. It seems fast. I don't know if it can operate that quickly. It might be that he's got to have it set to 1/8,000th. And yeah, see, Tim says the military has been photographing motion ballistics since at least the 1950s. I'm glad you brought that up, Tim, because they're not doing it like this. Click, They built all kinds of arrays of lenses. As a matter of fact, somebody was offering an alternative theory about Dr. Preston and what he might have been doing at the Bikini Atoll atomic bomb test. And they said, I think I've heard about this, but I haven't studied it, that there was some sort of high-speed camera that used an array of prisms and spun the optics to expose the film. Or somehow, you know, there's been a lot of approaches to high-speed photography. When I was in college and started my professional career working at Crest Films, those guys were involved in shooting on Action Master, which, I mean, it's not high speed compared to what we have today. I don't even know if that could go to 1,000 frames per second. I don't think it could, but it would basically just rip the film sprockets. It was such a sketchy operation. It was crazy. And then you basically started getting super duper high speed around the 2010s, like right when digital cinema cameras really started kicking in, because all this development in CMOS sensors was happening and the read rates were getting higher and the bandwidth of the digital systems handling all the signals was getting higher. And so now they use a phantom camera or something similar. It goes up to 10,000 frames per second or something like that. I mean, even the fact your phone can record 240 frames per second, that was massively high speed only a few years ago. But my point is, I'm not doubting that a 1/8,000th of a second shutter could freeze the time of a bullet. I'm just saying that the likelihood that a guy's finger pushing the button would do that at the precise instant to capture that bullet within the frame that he's shooting is so low. And furthermore, the likelihood that the composition would be perfect in the way that it is even lower. It doesn't even begin to address the fact that what the hell is he doing standing there with the camera set like that if he is not expecting a high-speed event around Trump? Everything about the way he has his camera set suggests that he knows that something is going to happen. Whether he knows it's a bullet fired at Trump or not, if that assassination had worked, Doug Mills would have published a photograph of, you would probably be able to, you'd see, I don't even want to go into it, but you know what I'm saying. If I am correct, someone wanted you to see a picture of Donald Trump's brain evulsed out the back of his head. How psychotic is that? And if Mills knew, he was down for it. I want to know what that guy knew going in there that morning. What did he know at 6:10 p.m.? And where the hell is the original EXIF data from his original camera file? What is with all these sketchy people who don't want me looking at their original camera files? So this is what I'm getting at with evidence. John Cullen likes to tell me everything is evidence of something. So I think I want to start getting more precise on the use of the word evidence. When I first started doing Crowdsource the Truth, I was trying to help people to differentiate between proof and evidence. Because a lot of people make that mistake. They don't seem to know the difference. You know, proof is a standard that varies depending on what we're talking about. If you're in civil court, it can be a preponderance of evidence. If you're in criminal court, it's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. If you're in England, there's a different standard of proof. If you're doing a math problem, there's another standard of proof. My point is, all this stuff is evidence, right? Unsteady Dave's video is evidence that we've got an unethical individual who would either rather attempt to make money than actually solve a crime that could save lives and prevent the country from plunging into probably a decade of darkness, because the people who did this, I think, are still out there. It's evidence of that. It's a lead to evidence. The guy's got a manipulated video that appears to show things that might have happened on that day. I want to get to his camera original video because he's telling us he's changed things about it. There's disputes now that have come up about various things in the video. Are these muzzle flashes? Are they not muzzle flashes? Is this a drone with Mr. Neon? Is it not a drone? So Dave is introducing confusion on Steady Dave. And I saw now that TMZ is coming out with some kind of documentary on Tubi, and that appears to be using Unsteady Dave's footage. And it's his footage, it's his grungy, munged up, screwed up footage, not the camera original. It had the, you know, go subscribe to Dave graphic. What is that guy doing? Because there's people who are telling me that they see timing discrepancies in Dave's video, and that goes back to Hawkins. I got to tell you something. This was like, I did all that stuff last night and this morning. That was like a visual effects. I mean, obviously, I don't think that would go into a movie or anything like that, but if anybody has seen, like, that's like Marlon Brando talking to Christopher Reeve in the Richard Donner cut of Superman right there. If anybody's seen that on a live stream earlier today, let me know. I thought it was pretty cool. But I did it because I think David would love it. The notion that he is not really dead. He's become a ghost in the machine. And his memory is with us, his research is with us, his voice is with us. It helps me to visualize what he might say, hear him saying it, see him say it. It's a little creepy. I got choked up actually making that at times. But yeah, settings are in the EXIF data, but the settings that we saw from Doug Mills' EXIF data have been edited because it shows, first of all, a resolution that the camera does not record at. So it's been cropped. And just like Dave's video, we know it's had stuff added to it, so we know this has been cropped. Why? Why don't you show us the original raw photo and say, look, there's Trump tiny, because I used a 24, because somebody told me, hey, he's going to get shot in the head. So get on a wide lens, open it up, and get the fastest shutter you can do. And see, because probably, I don't know, you'd have to get somebody's meter reading from the day and make a calculation. What ISO would you be set to? Because I know if I was going to that rally to shoot stills, I have outdated 5D Mark IV, not as fancy as this guy, but I would have taken the ISO all the way down to 50, or I think it might go to 25. There's an extended ISO mode. I would take it all the way down because it's a bright sunny day and I don't want noise on my images of President Trump. I wonder what they thought of the assassination. I don't want noise there, so I would have taken that ISO all the way down. And it's possible that Doug Mills eliminated the reporting of the ISO setting on his camera because maybe he felt, you know what, that's just gonna put it over the top. No professional photographer is gonna believe that I made all these settings. What if he had that ISO set to 1,000? You'd say, what? Why the hell did you do that? But maybe, you know, if you are an AI chip inside a Sony camera and it's programmed to, hey, when you detect motion that occurs in less than 1/16,000th of a second, fire the shutter. Maybe the camera's determined that that's the settings that it needs. It got the picture, not a human. So that's my new hypothesis. I straight up challenge Doug Mills. He's full of shit. That is not a photograph taken by a human without some form of software assistance. That's my new statement about it. Software assistance could be adding the bullet image after traditional photo manipulation, or the application of this previously unknown artificial intelligence image sensor that, as Hawkins said, can detect the motion of an object and take images based on the timing selected by a user. So David Mills is the user. He's going to go in the camera there and program it up to do whatever it is. You know, we've got these little tidbits that drop. Like somebody told Roger Stone that Maxwell Urich was there. I didn't know anything about Maxwell Urich before that. Somebody knew. So somebody knew something, maybe, allegedly, told Mills, and there you go. Just look around at how many articles there have been about this Douglas Mills photograph. It's so conspicuous. I really do have a very strong feeling that David would love this, that he is participating in this investigation, that he is inspiring us to think about the types of things that he would have thought about. He would have reminded us that Blaise Pascal tells us that it is our obligation to think hard. And I was thinking really hard about how to make this AI hawk David Hawkins avatar. And it worked, I think. I thought that was pretty successful, and I hope that people enjoy it. Oh yeah, what I wanted to say was, you know, David left behind a son, and David's wife had died maybe only a year or two before he did. So Matthew Hawkins is David's son. Unfortunately, I'm not in the financial position to help him, but I wanted to include with this video an invitation for people to make a financial contribution to Matthew Hawkins if you are so inclined and if you enjoyed the video. He's got a GoFundMe. I've put the link to it in the description. And I'm not making any sort of promise as far as Matthew Hawkins. He's not intending to create content. This is just a guy who's making his way in the world, and I feel badly that I can't help him. And so maybe this video can. And I know David would like that as well. And yeah. So anyway, right, evidence, leads, and proof. So there's this big dust-up developing with this stupid Unsteady Dave video. There's multiple dust-ups developing. People doubting the timing. Right, that's what I meant, the timing. Hawkins was very, very interested in the timing of events, and you know, he frequently said things that I think I didn't appreciate at the time. You know, this maritime clock and the atomic clock. He used to speak about that, but not the atomic clock. It was do people remember what that was? It was some particular radio isotope clock that was super accurate. And like, I don't know, people like me are sort of like, who cares? But no, these guys who invent these clocks, they understand that something about the timing, you know, and so again, I hope that the AI aspect wasn't distracting from the information that I was trying to convey, because I tried to put the beefiest information into the things that David, AI Hawk was saying, because that White's Gambling Club, I actually learned something about it today that I don't think I knew. Like, frequently David would have all this knowledge that he just figures everybody knows this already, so I'll just mention it and you'll know what I'm talking about. But most people had no idea about the vast things that he knew a lot about. And White's Club. Right, so the guy who started it was like somebody Bianco, and then he changed his name to White. So it sounds like maybe an Italian criminal went to England and did a little identity duplexing. White's Club was started in like 16 something. And when you read about it, it says, like, you know, princes and kings and everybody is involved in there. And it's basically known that conspiracies are hatched there and kingdoms are overthrown. I mean, it's like a deep state palace. And it's got all this stuff going on with Victor Rothschild, who David used to talk about a lot. I think that guy stole the cavity magnetron and whatnot. You know, it's amazing. David was like, how do I describe him? I mean, it's almost like you're a kid and he's in a tub of ice cream and you just want to eat it all, but then you're just like, oh my God, after you're done, you just don't, it's like so much to absorb. And I mean, David could just go on and on. He was just an amazing raconteur, and his delivery, his style, his vocabulary. He was one of the kindest people I ever knew. But it was sometimes confusing to understand what he was trying to say to us, and I was trying to capture that confusion actually even in the title. I don't know if people got that. David and I used to spend quite a lot of time going back and forth. This title is too confusing. The other thing that he would have loved about this is that today's title, Can AI Death Pool Betting Explain an Improbable Doug Mills Bullet Time Trump Photo? That's exactly 100 characters. And we used to stay on the phone with him developing titles. I was like, David, nobody understands what that means. He said, yes, but it's rich with meaning. But David, no one's gonna click on it. Yes, right, well, we want to go viral. So it was this constant tension, not tension like fighting, but he would say he wants to do X. And I would say, okay, David, in my opinion, from the standpoint of this being, a television production or whatever, the best way for us to do that is X, Y, and Z. And he would agree and say, okay, let's do that. Then we'd start the show and he'd just go off and do completely not whatever it was that we were talking about. But, this is when you work with people for years, you get to know the nuances of their personality. And so I hope people were satisfied by that. I tried to capture the essence of David, not just to make a funny tribute to him, although it did, I hope, do him proud. I hope he sees this video. But it really did help me to think about this. I mean, I'm telling you, I was like getting into Hawkins' head. I was like, patents, he would do something with the patents, and I was looking around at subsonic ammunition, and I was like, nothing about this really does anything. But this is one of the weapons. The camera is an information weapon, and the photo is so powerful, right? And think about it. People are saying, oh, if the photo is fake, then that supports the whole Trump faked it kind of idea, which a lot of people want to talk about. It's just a fascinating exploration of truth, technology, artificial intelligence. I just think every single aspect of it would have delighted David to his very core. So Matthew, I think you're probably going to see this video. I hope this video helps you as well. And people can help out Matthew if they feel like doing that. I hope you will. I don't know, I'm gonna keep trying to contact Doug Mills. He's not gonna say, well, you figured it out, sure, here's the evidence that I'm a liar and a fraud and everything I've done is fake. I don't think we're gonna get that, so, don't hold your breath, but perhaps someday we'll learn the facts, the details, how this occurred. Maybe 6 years from now, everybody will photograph bullets with a Sony camera, and people will say like, oh, remember when we thought that was some kind of incredible miracle that this dude could capture bullets? And now we realize you can do that on an iPhone 27 or whatever. Let's get to comments. What do people think about AI Hawk, Sony's first artificial intelligence image sensor, and the dubious veracity of photographer Douglas Mills? What do people think about that? David Sarnoff, right. Yes, he used to, is Field McConnell dead? Someone says rip Field. Is that accurate? Andy, has Field McConnell died? I would not revel in that. I didn't like Field McConnell, but that would be sad. Field McConnell, for people who don't know, in my opinion, see, the other thing is the air is crackling with David Hawkins. I'm glad I did this video because, you see, we had Lydia Gators on the other day, and people are like, why are you having this person on? This is, blah, blah, blah. She called me. Out of nowhere. I haven't thought about Larry Gators in, I don't know, 4 years? whenever he left. But what's interesting about Larry Gators is he came to me, he was introduced to me by David Hawkins. T says Hawk could stick Jello to walls. He could nail it to walls. Yes, but first we must examine the nail. And we found an artificial intelligence nail with Jello cohesiveness. And then he'd describe the nanoparticles or whatever. He'd have some way, he would. But I mean, look, it worked. We found a patent that does explain the unique technological. Find me a better explanation. I'm not gonna do this, but go into a studio with a Sony ILCE1 or whatever the hell it is, and just start smacking your finger on the shutter button and let me know how many pictures of air you get. Somebody said rip Field, but I don't think Field is dead. Let's make sure we don't put fake information in there. David died, I believe, September 2022. I think we're coming up on 2 years. And I've just been thinking about him a lot lately. And then when Lydia Gators called, we were talking about how her father was introduced to me by David, and that I later came to believe that I think Larry Gators was insinuated into the whole Field McConnell, David Hawkins situation, because they're just always doing that. They're trying to, when you have a successful team like Able Danger was, a lot of people like that and listen to that. They want to break that. They don't want David to have a platform. I think it was mostly about David, to tell you the truth. I think that Able Danger I think Field McConnell was after David the whole entire time. And what I learned shortly after David died is that it just seems like, some of the stuff that he was developing when he was at Schlumberger, he left to form his own company where he hired a bunch of artificial intelligence developers to create software based on his ideas. And part of the reason that David and I initially became friends is that we understood each other in that regard. Like, I explained to him how I had designed the 3D camera, and he's like, oh, well, are you an optical engineer or an electronic? I said, no, I just conceived of this tool that I wanted and then went and found optical engineers, electronic engineers, all kinds of different guys to help me build it. And I was sort of like the designer of it and the manager of the project, but I didn't know how to do all that stuff, and that's what he did. So he's the creator of it. These individual software developers didn't get together and make it, but there were always social engineers hanging around who, it's so strange and it seems so petty and so just childish that they're on his YouTube show saying you didn't invent this thing or whatever. But it's the same stuff that George and his idiot brother and all of these social engineers are constantly trying to do. So I don't know, if you invent some technology like David did, which was, remember, that was his expert thinking, right? He created that deductive computing machine that was ground truthing artificial intelligence results against the expert systems, right? He wrote that whole paper for the Man-Machine Journal. I actually never got to read that because it's published by maybe Elsevier or something, and they would have charged you a lot of money to get it. But anyway, Cullen said that that's basically known as a seminal paper in artificial intelligence. They would always tell us how he used to go to that, what was it, that conference in 1981 where he was predicting all this stuff and they laughed at him, but all that happens now. His predictions are all basically out already. So I don't know, it feels like maybe David did invent some pretty important, that Hesper software for, analyzing geological survey data and finding oil. We've noticed some of these inventions where it seems like if you invent something important enough, they say, oh, we're going to take that. And I guess there's some set of circumstances where you benefit and then others where you don't. We've heard about putative Operation Paperclip Nazi George Henry Swigert. For some reason, Motorola never got sued. They patent a full duplex radio portable telephone like 6 years after George Henry. And I don't know, as I read it, and when I show it to artificial intelligence, I'm not a lawyer and neither is it, but it can't explain how the Motorola patent doesn't infringe on the George Henry patent. Seems substantially similar. And we also can't explain why George Henry never made any money from that, or why his mentally ill son spends all his time suing people who aren't Motorola, which has probably made billions of dollars from that. That was one of the most significant inventions of the 20th century, the radio telephone. That's the cell phone, the wireless phone. The principles of that are used by every single person. I mean, it's like inventing the car or the wheel. It's a pretty big deal. I guess we can understand why the stupid Mario brothers are pissed off that they're not billionaires. They should be on an island somewhere, maybe with Jeffrey Epstein, but instead, busy writing stupid lawsuits against me. Well, that's pretty much what I wanted to share with everybody about this Doug Mills photograph. If anybody knows Doug Mills or how I can get in touch with him, I'd really like to speak to him. This is an important question. Obviously, he's under no obligation to answer my questions, but it's essentially a public fraud if what I'm saying is true, and I don't know if it is. This is a hypothesis that I have formed based on this evidence. Now, a patent that's been filed in the patent office, that is evidence, because you could walk right into court with that and say, here is recognized by the court document. That doesn't need to be authenticated because it's an official document from the US Patent Office. Okay, so that evidence instructs me that the technology exists that could have done this. I want to know if Doug Mills was using that, and if he was, who or what gave him the low-key warning of a high-speed event that was scheduled to take place once Donald Trump began his speech. This goes to the mens rea, the guilty mind. It seems like there were people who knew prior to 6/11 that bullets were going to get fired at Donald Trump. And if you knew that and said nothing, how are you not complicit? Uh-oh, we got like maybe a dog rape about to happen. That dog was looking at the other dog like it was lunch. Dog politics. But I think that is a fake photograph taken with artificial intelligence to deceive the public. It was intended to record a horrific crime, shock the conscience of the nation, humiliate and demoralize anyone who loves Donald Trump, terrorize everyone with an image of, I don't think we've ever seen anything like that. Think about that. I think I'm correct. And think about the sick person that would have calculated this type of psychological terrorism to go to those lengths to record an image like that. There's just no explanation for these anomalous settings from such an experienced professional photographer. Oh yeah, and remember this debate that Lee and I were having, like, why wouldn't the guy use a zoom? This is an actual picture in the lower right-hand corner there of Doug Mills. He is not one of these cinematographers I was talking about who have this aversion to zoom lenses. I disagree with those cinematographers. I think that was true maybe in the 70s. Ingenue zoom lenses are tack sharp, beautiful, look great. I love them. But the point is, Doug Mills shoots zooms. Why was he on a 24mm lens standing? It's just the wrong lens. You're on the wrong lens, dude. 24 to 70 might have made sense. Anyway, that's all for today, everyone. I've got one last word from AI Hawk.
Thank you for watching, everyone. This has been AI Hawk. I'm an artificial intelligence avatar created by Jason and based upon the ideas and concepts originally presented by our dear deceased friend, David Hawkins. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider making a financial contribution to David's son Matthew via the GoFundMe link provided in the description below. Thank you very much, and over to you, Jason.
David, thanks for watching, everybody. Please send some money to Matthew Hawkins. He's having a tough time. Appreciate everybody who's sponsoring the show and everybody who loved David.